The soul comes into the body, not suddenly, shockingly, but in stages, in increments. 40 days before conception, the soul is told that it's going to be born, conceived. That's why everywhere in Torah, I don't know if you've noticed this, the angel comes to tell Sarah that she's going to have a child. What does he say? This time next year. Now we know that it doesn't take a year. It only takes 9 months. Why is it always this time next year? It's because gestation is 9 months. But a soul has to be given some time to adjust to the idea of being born. So it actually takes a year. So first the soul is told to get ready. The soul is not thrilled by that idea. To leave heaven, to be constricted into the limitations of a human body, to share that body with a human soul that has human demands, not an appealing prospect. But if God says, the soul gets ready. That's the first step. Second step, of course, is conception. David HaMelech says, and this is really awesome and beautiful, David HaMelech says, my mother and father abandoned me, and God gathered me in. Avi ve'imi azavuni. My mother and father abandoned me, and God took me in. The Gemara says, David was not bad-mouthing his parents. He wasn't kvetching. He was marveling, because he remembered being conceived. What is it like? You're this tiny little being, all alone, because your mother and father are sleeping. So the Gemara describes it graphically. The soul looks to the father, he's sleeping. Looks to the mother, she's sleeping. And this soul is going through the most traumatic moment. It's more traumatic than birth. In birth, you just go a few inches from one place to another. This is going from 0 to 60. So this tiny little thing, I don't know what it's called before it's even a fetus, is looking around to see who's in charge, who's babysitting. And the parents are sleeping. So what reassures this conception? God's presence. He remembered being comforted by the fact that God was there when his mother and father were sleeping. In another place, in Tehillim, David says, even as I go in the valley of the shadow of death, I am not afraid, for you are with me. The Gemara says, what is this valley of the shadow of death, and why does he keep going there? Fine, you're not afraid because God is with you. Don't go there. Stay away from these places. And besides, why is David describing himself? And we have to read his experience? So the Gemara says, David is talking about every soul that was ever born. Every soul goes through the valley of the shadow of death, and that is the birth process. The valley is that blank space between life in the womb and life outside the womb. That's the valley. And it has a little danger to it, so that there's a touch of death there. Life in the womb is wonderful. You're taught the entire Torah. It's being in heaven. Leaving the womb is very traumatic. Living outside the womb is life again. So David HaMelech said, how did I survive the trauma of birth? It is so traumatic that it erases your memory of 9 wonderful months. It would be much more traumatic if God wasn't there. So how does every fetus born into this world survive that trauma? It sees God present. God is there to see it through the experience. So the valley of the shadow of death is really the birth process. So people who have been through a near-death experience relive their own birth. It's a flashback. Every birth is a near-death experience. And what enables us to survive it? We are conscious of God being there. So every fetus born into this world has had an experience with God. So where does our faith in God come from? We can't prove it. We have no arguments. We don't need it. We remember God's presence when we needed him the most, at conception and at birth. So every near-death experience, anybody who's been through it, comes out the other end believing. Why is that? Because he's reliving and re-experiencing his own birth. You know, some experts say near-death experience is people seeing themselves in a dark tunnel. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's an angel there, all white, urging you to come into the light. You get the picture? You're being born. You're going through a dark tunnel, and there's this guy dressed in white, or pale green, urging you to come out because he doesn't want to get sued. The trauma also brings the memory of the trust and the comfort you got from God's presence. So where does Emunah come from? From having experienced God. Now when the soul leaves the body, it goes through the reverse process. It doesn't leave instantly, completely. It hovers. It doesn't want to say goodbye. So it separates from the body in stages. The moment of death, for 3 days, 7 days, 30 days, a year. The Torah tells us this so that our own existence is expanded greatly. We know what happens even though we can't see it. We can stay in touch even though we can't see it. So our horizons are much broader and much greater. And the world needs to know these things because it's a blessing to know these things. And we, as the Jewish people, have an obligation to be a light to the nations, to share with them the knowledge that comes only from Torah, because we know things that can't be seen. Shalom Aleichem. How are you? You know, I do a lot of talking, a lot of Zooming, many classes, many subjects, but that's all formal stuff. Hopefully good stuff, but formal. We also have a Wednesday night meeting that's more informal and kind of Hamish. If you want to join us for that kind of an event, interactive, time for questions and so on, if you want to join us for this side of conversation, click on the link below and join us every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock. Well, maybe not every Wednesday night, but we try to make it every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock. A more informal chat, which can be more enjoyable at times than the formal stuff. So check it out. Click on the link and join us. Try it, you'll like it.